Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. I'm your host, Wayne Liu, and I'm joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong. The Raptors went 1-1 over the weekend. Nice win over Portland yesterday. How you feeling, man? You good?
Yeah, I feel good, man. It's a good weekend to, refresh, think about the Raptors, come back in, chat about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about you, brother?
No, it was good. I think just seeing the Raptors win last night, I think I didn't necessarily change the vibes in the sense that it's not like everyone was super happy. Obviously, I think people are pretty dissatisfied with the season to date, but just seeing a game where everybody contributed, I think that's the only time we've seen that happen this season.
Yeah, the bench extending the lead.
Yeah, Nick Nurse calling it, we hit the lottery.
Oh, wow. Is that what he said?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
He's like, we hit the lottery with the bench. And
okay, that's a backhanded compliment. He's like, it's a 1 in 6 million chance of that happening, and it did today.
Yeah.
The starters gave the lead back, though.
Yeah.
It's just, but
it was
whatever.
It was a good win. It was a game of runs. It was a good win.
It was a good win.
And I'm happy that, the bench got to keep the minutes down for the starters. I mean, look, the Raptors were way fresher down the stretch last night because the bench was able to actually come in and play 10, 15 minutes, which is
this
just
is the
an
lowest
average.
Expectations.
Oh, there's no expectations to the bench.
Actually, the thing you mentioned on the React pod, I think on Friday, because I think the Raptors last week, the bench was bleeding 2 points every minute, right?
Yes.
You were at some point they should consider just holding the ball when they came in.
No, listen, my argument was, if you're going to lose by 2 points per minute, if you can hold 24 seconds of just holding the ball and forcing a turnover and then getting yourself back on defense where you give up an average about 1 point per half-court possession, you'd give up actually mathematically less points per minute than 2.
No, that's... No, this is... No, that's analytics at its finest. But have you seen there's been a trend this season, and I think Ja Morant did it last week where they roll the ball in.
Oh,
but the clock runs, right?
And I think
but the shot clock doesn't.
They must practice this because obviously we've seen essentially whatever you want to call that play, but we've seen it before. But they've got
stall ball.
They've gotten into such a point now, the Grizzlies, where they are able to both roll the ball out and keep it going, but also do it slow at a very slow speed.
Yeah, and
so
you can
burns the max amount of time.
And you can run actually 20 seconds off the clock.
I think it works a lot better when you have a really quick guard like Ja, because once he picks up the ball and goes, then you're in a standstill position. That's where you don't want to gamble and go for the ball.
But this is a suggestion for the Raptors bench is for Malachi to just roll the ball and for the 4 guys to form a wall around the ball. And make sure no one
elevator doors just for an inbound.
Holy man.
Yeah.
But yeah, good bench performance.
Honestly, great bench performance last night. And because they were able to play 15 minutes or so, the starters didn't have to play 40 minutes. They played in the mid-30s.
Oh, great.
And they were able to make a lot more hustle plays down the stretch. I just loved how they competed yesterday. I think that was for me, I keep thinking about the customer, all right, coming into that building,
right?
Spending $10 on a slice of pizza.
The customer is always right. Yeah.
And for them, they're coming because they have a lot of faith in the Raptors. They want to see
or their company has given them tickets.
That's fine.
Oh, okay, but yeah, go ahead.
But, ultimately, they're in for an entertainment product, right? And when you want to see the Raptors, what you want to see is their brand of basketball. I think everyone walked away happy from the arena last night because of how hard they played. Pascal diving on the floor with Dame Lillard to win a loose ball. Pascal rotating over and blocking Dame at the rim.
Yeah, Pascal grabbing Dame's ankle.
Yeah, that was not great. I'm not even going to lie. Even I wouldn't do that at the 3-on-3 tournament. But still, Scotty winning a rebound over top of 3 guys to sort of secure the possession, and then Pascal getting fouled after that. Because of Scotty's hard work, or Fred with the verticality on Dame Lillard, then knocking down 2 threes, and then him running through Nurkic and getting just completely flattened by a guy who's 300 pounds. But Fred taking that punishment so that the Raptors can get this win. And look, it took a lot to get them out of this game. At one point, it became a 3-point game, and when you have Dame Lillard on the other side and they're making that push, and it cuts down to 3. It's truly a danger zone scenario because he's that good, and we saw that last night. But obviously, Fred responded with those 2 threes, which was a huge moment, forcing Portland into a timeout, and then a couple more hustle plays down the stretch. And listen, you literally needed everybody to play well. You needed
to barely win.
to come up with all these hustle plays, and then you still are in a tight game. And it's just a reminder that like nothing's gonna really come easy for the Raptors. Like I don't even remember the last time they blew a team out where it was chill.
Yeah, even the Cleveland game, they're up a lot, but then it got tight at the end too, right?
Exactly, right. Even when they beat the Knicks on the road, it was obviously it was a very tight game down the stretch
that was
as
a tight
well.
one too.
So last night wasn't a chance to. Yeah, the Hawks way back in the day. I think that was on Halloween.
You were 29 back then?
I was 29 back then. I was in a different decade. But no, for real, like it just seemed like the Raptors played really well last night, and you know they still were in a game. But that's what ultimately it takes if they want to turn the season around. And I know a lot of people are already on the side of we want to tank. If you want to turn the season around, like the Raptors got to play that hard consistently.
Yeah, I think two things. I think, you know, you talk about a player like Fred, you talk about the hustle that Pascal and, you know, Scotty and the rest of the guys out there yesterday. Like these guys are still competing. You know, I think the effort level has been questioned at times this season, you know, from us and from the head coach. But you can see that they're out there fighting. And maybe even more discouraging sometimes is to see them fight this hard, especially the starting lineup, and still come up short, right? But you know, the compete level is still there for me. And I think, you know, the other thing, if you want to stay positive too, like there is a formula to the Raptors winning, like you mentioned yesterday. You know, the starters played well. The bench was able to give them a lift. And, you know, we saw like when they beat Cleveland, you know, when the 3-point shooting is there, like we know what it takes for this Raptors team to win games. It's just hard for them to hit that formula every night. Yeah. That's the tough thing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think also at the same time though, like that kind of effort that they kind of played with last night, that all-out effort, winning the possession battle. They had 13 offensive rebounds to 10 for Portland. They forced Portland into 22 turnovers as a season high for them.
Yeah, those should be there like most nights.
Right? We know. I mean, look, I described it on the React Pod too, but the Raptors are a try-hard team.
Yeah,
they're not a team that.
But they're a try-hard team who hasn't tried hard at times this season. Yeah, is the problem.
So when a try-hard team doesn't try hard, they're just a bad team. Yeah, so that's what they've been for the last month, but. I think that there is still that fight in them. And listen, I'm not trying to say that like they have to play hard for 48 minutes every single game because that's not realistic. Nor am I saying that they can't ever have any lulls or that they don't sometimes play hard in games where they don't play that hard over the course of it. But like that Knicks game, for example, right?
Or sometimes they you know, just play hard in the last 2 minutes.
That's what I'm saying though. Like we see the fight, but it can't be for 2 minutes. I think it needs to be consistent throughout.
That's not a good product. Going back to the customer. You cannot make customers sit there for 46 minutes. And then run a full court press like an elementary school team and fiercely try to come back every game. That's not how NBA teams win
I know
games.
the Raptors they have to be leading the league in full court presses, man.
They have to. Nobody's going to roll the ball against this Raptors team. If there's one thing we can say about this team.
There's
no one's rolling the ball
here.
But yeah, so they get the win. And I thought Christian Koloko was a bright spot as well. I feel like, you know, he's been up and down. I know he had that 3-pointer to beat Phoenix, which was a nice highlight for him.
Right.
But he's been struggling of late. I think as you would expect from a second rounder in his first season. But I feel like he's, you know, asserted himself nicely, like yesterday, and a decent stretch.
Yeah, no,
recently.
I thought the Raptors got really strong production from their center spot last night, which is something that I don't usually say. But they had 3 guys play center. Scotty played center for the starting group defensively. Then Thad Young came off the bench and played some center, and then Christian Koloko came off the bench and played some center. Now, I think Christian probably would have played more than 13 minutes if he had not been called for 5 fouls in those 13 minutes. Was like, come on, some of those are so light.
Christian hasn't gotten a single call this season.
He very cleanly blocked Damian Lillard and got called for the block,
including getting fined when Caleb Martin just straight up wanted to fight him.
Yeah, what happened there? We still don't fully understand what specifically happened, even though I've interviewed him about it. Shout out to the Caleb Martin of his era, Caleb Martin. But yeah, like I thought they got great production from the center spot because I thought Scotty obviously set the tone early. I liked him attacking, you know, Nurkic in that deep drop. I'm sure we'll get to more of that conversation. But you know, I thought Christian did the great job coming in off the bench. There was a stretch there where Portland didn't have a single field goal for 9 minutes, and that was between the end of the first quarter and the start of the second quarter. Christian was on for like out of those 9 minutes, Christian was probably on for like 7 of those. You know what I mean? And I just thought that he was in a really great groove. I thought him, along with Precious Achiuwa and Chris Boucher, really provided you with a really solid line of shot blockers. Considering those are your 3 best shot blockers, they're all on the floor at once together, playing in a zone. You know, Portland didn't get a lot of chances to score at the rim at all. And not only that, though, when they were out there against Anthony Simons or against Dame Lillard, guys who are really, prolific threats to pull up. Obviously, Dame being one of the best in the league, best in history to do that, to pull up off the high screen. You need your centers to not only protect the rim, but you need them to be really mobile and come out to the 3-point line. And I thought that Christian did a great job of that, moving his feet. Thad Young did a great job of that, moving his feet. And then Scotty did the same thing as well. And the mobility there was really able to sort of keep Dame from, launching those bombs, which he did ultimately hit a couple, especially down the stretch there in the fourth quarter. But, a lot of it was they were able to force Dame to sort of turn off that 3-point shot and drive inside and look for kickouts. And that's how Dame had a lot of turnovers, 7 for him, which is quite high for obviously a guy who's so experienced. And I really enjoyed it. A couple of blocks, a couple of charges. You just rarely see that good of a production from the Raptors center position, but that actually kind of carried them last night.
Yeah, and Scotty had a nice bounce back performance too. 22 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks. Like you mentioned, a lot of questions I think asked of him last week as well about how he's been, the lack of aggressiveness in the first half and like dealing with teams playing the drop against him and how he's using that open space. And you saw yesterday, I think he did make a point to be way more aggressive in the first half, looking for a shot, getting to the basket and all that.
And I think that, obviously the whole goal of Scotty being more aggressive against that drop coverage, where essentially guys aren't really guarding him and giving him a ton of space, is that you still need to be like involved and make plays where you pressure the rim. And there's so many different ways that you can do that, even against that style of coverage. I thought in the first quarter, he took some jumpers, took a 3, made it, took a mid-range jumper, made it, and stuff like that, where it's just like, again, there's so much room out there. He's literally has every single option available to him. So he has that, and he hit a couple jumpers. The thing is, that didn't change Portland's defense at all. They're like, that's cool. We will live with you shooting 10 of these if you want to. But the thing is, no one really actually wants to see that style of offense, right? Mm-hmm. So instead, what they did was a lot more action flowing through Scotty Barnes, dribble handoff actions into, OG Anunoby getting off of, dribble handoff and attacking downhill or pulling up from mid-range, or Gary Trent doing that, or Fred doing that. There's different ways. Essentially, if you're given that huge gap as by your defender, you can essentially transfer that gap to your teammate who might be a better jump shooter, as so long as you set a good screen. So I thought he did a really great job with that. But I also thought that, yesterday, in sort of like true like center fashion, they also did a great job of rolling to the rim, whether that was Thad Young, whether that was Christian Koloko, whether that was Scotty Barnes. And, it's not just like you roll to the rim and you like dunk the ball all the time. I mean, for Christian, it is like that. And for Thad, I mean, he doesn't dunk the ball, but the little quick flip shot, right? the pick and roll with the little flip at the end. But for Scotty, what he has the ability to do is he can roll hard, take the contact, and we saw it twice in the fourth quarter, once where he found OG for 3, once where he found Fred for 3, where when Scotty's rolling and catching it on the move, he's still making a hard, aggressive move towards a shot blocker. It still pulls Portland's help defenders over, and then he's able to make the next pass out for the threes, which, set up OG and Fred. So I just like the engagement. He started early. He had an approach early. His approach changed as the game went on, adapted, but it showed like a real versatility in how he can attack that role. And again, like, I just think that this is where you can find the most production for him, right? This is the way you can get him the ball. This is the way you can get him involved. And then I think more than anything else, it's more important how you perform defensively. And I thought on that front, he was pretty admirable, right? He wrestled Jusuf Nurkic all night. And it's not like Jusuf Nurkic was never going to pop off for like 30 points or anything like that. But the physicality to bump him and challenge him around the rim, box him out and all that kind of stuff, it takes a lot out of you. Obviously, with Nurkic being like at least 100 pounds heavier, but he did a good job. So I think, there were really no complaints. And yet, one of the big stories after the game was sort of like, why did Thad Young and Scotty Barnes get into that little thing,
Oh, yeah. Let's get to the drama now. Oh, and by the way, Otto Porter did not play yesterday. Just an update.
It's interesting because, I haven't seen Otto in the last couple of days. I was just at practice. Did not find him. Maybe he was in the back.
He was showing up to the bench until recently, last week, until right after Nick Nurse provided the update that he was not close.
Well, yeah, exactly. We would see him work, like, obviously, not dressed for the game.
Right, but he'd be on the bench.
He'd be on the bench.
Yeah. But he hasn't been at the game.
We went to the Bucks game. I don't know if he was there.
No, he wasn't there.
The Knicks game wasn't there.
At least
yesterday,
not on the bench.
He wasn't there.
Yeah.
I didn't go yesterday. So this is just asking other people around. And then I practiced today. I didn't see him. Maybe he was.
I'll keep an eye. I'll keep an eye.
He was dipping the toe in the ice cover. I don't know why it's the toe thing.
You know, Alex McKechnie's staring at that toe like Westbrook was staring at that MVP trophy that one time. He's like, yo, just give me 1 hour with that. I'll turn them day to day in a real hurry.
Anyways,
that was your Otto Porter. But like you mentioned, so there was this clip during this was halftime of yesterday's game.
Yeah.
Raptors came out to warm up, and I guess if you're watching on, I think like a League Pass feed, they'll show you the players getting warmed up, and you know, this was clips and obviously passed around on social media of, you know, Thad Young and Scottie getting into a bit of a shouting match, and at one point like Christian Koloko had to come in.
Juancho had to come in.
Oh yeah, Juancho had to come in as well.
Yeah.
You know, great performance by the bench even at half.
They really
to kind of settle the situation. And after the game, you know, Scottie and Thad were both asked about it. Scottie said it was just a little disagreement and that they hugged it out. And he said, "quote That's my boy." And then Thad Young was asked about it too, and here's what he had to say.
He already said you guys are all right.
Yeah, we just had a disagreement. You know, he actually told me he loved me. And I told him I love him back. You know, so, you know, no different than, you know, brothers going back and forth. You know, especially when we're both passionate about the game. And I think that's one of the biggest things. You know, we're both passionate about what we're doing, our craft, and just making sure that, you know, we get ourselves a win.
Yeah.
When have we ever had an argument like that?
Oh, I'm sure these arguments do happen. I just don't know how often they happen, like on the floor where it's more visible.
Yeah, listen, man. I think too. You look at where the Raptors are at, and we've talked about it. Like, I don't think we can expect everything to be great. You know, just in the locker room.
If everything was great, I'd actually find it to be a bigger issue.
Yeah, and anything beyond, you know, beyond what, you know, these guys have said and what we've seen, I think it's just going into speculation. But at the same time, you know, I don't think anybody should be surprised as there's a bit of frustration or even friction in the locker room right now because of where the team is at.
Yeah, and what can I say? So yesterday I wasn't at the arena. So today I went down to practice and just made sure to sort of get some more insight because obviously this is a big question that everyone asked about, right? And I think for me, the takeaway is that like the focus, it's sort of just like trying to get everyone focused for the game. More than anything else. It wasn't anything beyond that. Sure. It wasn't like a personality rift or anything like that. It was really just about staying focused, staying locked in, being ready. We've obviously seen the Raptors struggle at third quarters this season, right? That could have easily been the script in last night's game where they kind of take the lead at halftime, but it's not a substantial lead, and then they don't really come out strong, and then Dame Lillard hits like 2 or 3 threes or whatever, right? So the thing was, it was just about focus, right? And we saw that there was an extended clip that was posted where Gary and Scottie were talking first too, like, that was the consistent message, and it was all towards one way. Like, it wasn't like, you know, essentially the whole idea was just let's just get really focused for the game. And it's not to say that like Scottie wasn't focused. I mean, he was playing well in the first half as well, and it's not like needs to always be told that. But I think it's just like that urgency from the team, you know. And when Thad Young comes over and speaks, when Fred comes over and speaks, it's the same message, and it's the same from Gary as well. So I think it was just like, let's just make sure we start the game a third quarter well, and that's exactly what happened. Like they won the third quarter by 10 points. And that really changed the game and gave the Raptors that breathing room. Now, of course, it was a game of run, so Portland was able to come back a little bit, and they started to close hard. But ultimately, like, that was sort of the message. And I think, you know, it's not that uncommon, I would say. I think that when you ask a 21-year-old to be one of the pillars of your franchise, which is exactly what's happened so far, right, you might have to like live with some ups and downs. That's not to say other people don't make mistakes. You could be older and make mistakes, right? I'm sure there are plays where Thad Young takes a play off defensively, or Fred takes a play off defensively, or whatever, right? The focus isn't always like consistent just because guys are older. But I think the approach is sort of trying to like get, especially this like younger player who we have seen super high highs from, but also pretty low lows from, to just continue to really be engaged and sort of shop the focus. It wasn't about last night's game. It really wasn't. It's just about a season-long kind of trend about just trying to stay on task and be as engaged as possible.
Yeah, and I think...
And whatever, it's just coming out and warming up for the second half. Like, it's not the biggest thing. Just because you take 10 extra shots before halftime or whatever, like, we see people kind of lollygagging for that, you know?
Yeah.
But, and this won't be the last time, it won't be the first time, but yeah, ultimately that's really it.
Yeah, and I think as a former, you know, recent 20-year-old, you know, like sometimes, you know, younger guys, like Scottie is 21. I think, I don't know, sometimes, you know, you don't want to hear it from some of the guys.
you know what? That's actually kind of like if you came up to me and you know what I mean? Yo, write 10 things right now. And I'm like, no.
And you're like, you've been here twice this month. You talking to me right now? No, but yeah, I mean, Yeah, there's just a bigger picture about just locker rooms and stuff. Like, like even when the Raptors were on their way to the championship, don't forget, like that was not a good locker room.
Yeah, but I mean, again, like there's like not a good locker room because there's like hard personality splits, or there's not a good locker room because they're losing and people aren't necessarily happy with the situation.
No, I
think it's probably closer to that than anything else.
I think so.
Right. But to be honest, I don't even care about the drama. The ultimate thing is just like, can everyone work hard towards the goal of trying to win? And not even trying to win is in like, we don't tank the season or whatever. I understand that like it's probably more prudent at this point to go in that direction. But my point is like long term, when you think about like eventually one day Scottie Barnes inheriting this franchise and being that go-to guy, that's the standard that I would like to see him go up to the next 21-year-old who's not, before shoot around or whatever, and just like kind of came with the same approach. You know what I mean?
No,
and so,
sure.
but like you have to sort of instill that in the first place. That's all.
Yeah, I think it does illustrate, like, it is interesting thinking about just the ages of the guys on the team, right? Like, there's clearly a divide, like the younger guys, and not a divide in the way there's a divide in the locker room, but just a divide in the age groups, right? You got the Scotty, I think OG put there too, like Gary, and then, the Fred and Pascals, and even the Thad, Thad Young, even Chris a bit older too. Yeah. It's an interesting mix.
I mean,
it's an interesting mix, especially when you're struggling, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, also at the same time, you do see a larger trend, right? You do see a larger trend. I mean, I think there's been multiple instances involving Nick, involving Masai.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't think it should surprise anybody that
it's actually one continuous straight line.
Yeah. Right? No, I just don't think it should surprise anyone that there's some unhappiness on that team. Speaking of the other drama that everybody's...
Was there other drama?
Well, I think this is the number one conversation right now, dealing with Fred VanVleet's contract situation, right?
Oh,
so
okay.
Fred,
right.
Fred last week was talking on JJ Redick's podcast, and then I believe it was Josh Lewinberg at TSN reported in a story that Fred turned down a 4-year extension for $114 million before the start of the season. And then Fred clarified his situation after yesterday's game, and here's what he had to say.
There was never a formal offer made. It was a mutual decision by both sides that the smart thing to do would be to wait it out. There was no rush, given that I can still sign the extension all the way throughout the end of the season. I also have a player option in my contract this summer, and we can deal with that at the end of the season. So take my word for it, and I'm disappointed that it's come out. I don't want it to be a distraction. I'm completely focused on this team. My loyalty is to this team and to this franchise, and trying to get us back to the level that we're accustomed to around here.
Yeah, shout out to Aaron Rose, by the way, for clipping that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, my thing with this is I'm not surprised that Fred made sure to come out and say it, because no one asked Fred the question. Fred just made sure to say it individually and clarify the statement at the end of his press conference. So those are like, a lot of the clips you hear are like prompted conversations. This one, he made sure to take his time out to say this, because we've heard Fred talk about, I mean, look, listen, Fred is the most requested Raptor, right? Like in terms of like, essentially the process works like the PR staff comes out, whether that's pregame or post-game or at practice, and they come out with the clipboard and they're like, all right, who do you want for today, right? And people request. Fred is obviously requested all the time. Fred VanVleet is right.
He's actually right.
Basically, yeah, he really is for the beat writers. And so he's been asked about this quite a bit. And I remember even at Media Day when he was asked about this too, he's been very consistent on that sense of he's like, all he's really ever going to say about this is that him and Masai and Bobby have a really good relationship. They're going to continue to work together and they're going to focus on the team, but they're not going to talk about their contract, right? So I don't think that he was particularly happy for that detail to come out. And so therefore he made that point to say it out loud. I think it's not a really good thing to sort of come out publicly, not just in the sense that, like, I don't think, for example, I would want my contract negotiations to be put on air. You know,
no comment.
In the offseason, maybe a little different story. But the point is that, like, you know, this is not only a private thing, but I don't think it's good for the locker room or even good in terms of the overall discussion, right? When we're sort of now people are looking at him like, oh, he's money hungry or he wants this and this and this, right? I mean, the reality is all the players want this and this and this, right? But it shouldn't really come out and become such a big talking point. And so Fred coming out and shutting it down, I thought was important. Yeah, I mean, whether he wants that money or not. I mean, look, I thought in the offseason, if he was able to physically recover, that would have been a good price for what Fred provides for this team when fully healthy. And I'm talking about like start of last season when he was on an all-star level. At the same time, Fred probably looked at it like, at the start of last season when he was an all-star level, he was better than some of these other guys who signed these bigger deals in the offseason. And so it probably made more sense for him to wait a little bit longer, see in the offseason where the Raptors can offer him up to 130, right? And so, they just kind of waited it out. Plus, because of the nature of the extension talks, they can technically go and sign that extension tomorrow, that 114.
Right, he has until the end of the season, basically. Right?
So, but the point is, though, I just didn't think that he really wanted it out there. And when it was out there, I think it was smart for him to shut it down. Because, again, it's just not good productively for the team to sort of always constantly discuss this.
Yeah, I think Fred's been in the spotlight, as the team has struggled, as he has struggled. But like you said, I think he's repeatedly said, even last week to reporters, that he just wants to address all this stuff at the end of the season, right? Like, I think right now he just wants to focus on the team and kind of getting right himself. But
no, they're in a bad place. Like, this is not the time to really talk about like what he may want in the offseason. Yeah, quite frankly, like I think people can probably guess what he wants in the offseason without it being explicit. But I think for his focus right now, he's worried about how do you turn this thing around. Like the thing about, and what I've been enjoying about watching this last little stretch here is sort of when that adversity hits, who's going to take over and take responsibility for this thing, right? And that Bucks game was so ugly, and no one really played great throughout the game. But to me, it was like I saw Fred trying to take responsibility for that team. And, I thought he played well in that game. Obviously, he made the mistakes at the end. That's on him. But ultimately, you don't get to the end without him taking that responsibility in the first place. That next game, he was the only guy to show up for the Raptors. The only guy. And then this last game, I thought he played really well again. And that's not to say that like these 3 games are going to flip the season. My point is when you are down, which guy is going to dig even deeper and try to get there? I was at the arena super early for some reason the other day, and I was out there like essentially at 4 o'clock. And usually it's empty in there at 4 o'clock. Usually when you get into the arena at 4 o'clock, you get in there on the court, you just see dancers like warming up, or like people perform like practicing their national anthems, or just whatever. Like people,
you might see Isaiah Mobley.
Yeah, exactly, right. And usually like probably 2 hours, maybe 2 hours 30 before the game, that's when you start to see the third stringers roll in, right? And they start to get their shots up. I was a little surprised to see that like the first person there was Fred VanVleet with like, it was like probably 4:30 for a 7:30 game. And he went through about a 45-minute shooting workout, which is a lot longer than he usually does. And just to get his shots up. And then I saw that happen again the next time around when it came to the arena. And it's just like, to me, it's like, okay, look, he's getting extra shots up to make sure, because obviously he's in a shooting funk and that's hurting the team, right? So that I've been enjoying watching, like sort of at least Fred trying to turn that around. And when he hit those 2 threes yesterday, let out that big scream, you could tell that it's sort of been weighing on him, not just like how badly the team is playing, but probably also all the other stuff. The contract's out there, the criticism is out there.
I think this is the first time that he's dealing with this in his career. I mean, he's been on this upward trajectory since he joined the league. Everybody knows his story. Going from undrafted to where he's at now, and this is the first time that I think the spotlight's been turned on him in a negative way. So, and it's coming at a very crucial time in his career as he's potentially heading into free agency. But
listen, I understand if people are done with him, man. I totally get it. Like I see all the comments, man. It's very, very clear. And this is not me trying to defend him. This is just me showing you what I see. That's all.
No, I get it, man. Stop defending.
No, yourself. There's just such a strong like Raptors media is protecting Fred.
Oh yeah, it's all good. It's all good, bro.
What do you want me to say, man?
We're just here to chill, man. Anyways, we'll have Michael Grange on the line. Maybe talk a little bit more about Fred.
Oh, okay.
And some other things after the break.
Okay.
Is the break in the rundown this time?
We are going to take a break. I've been your host, Will Lou. That's Alex Wong. You're listening to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Luke. I continue to be joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong. And we are joined on the line by Sportsnet's very own Michael Grange. Grange, how you doing?
I'm excellent. Gentlemen, how are we?
I was great, man. Just went down to practice. Not much happened, Grange. Not gonna lie to you.
Not much happened. No, I had to go to the doctors. So that was my excuse. I'm not even making that up.
All right.
At practice. It's not even. There's not even a doctor's note. I just went.
You know what I found out today, Grange? By the way, Grange, I hope you're okay.
I am good.
Okay,
no
good.
problem.
All right.
Dress warm, Grange.
I found out today that there's attendance done on the media when we go down to practice.
No,
Did you know this?
really?
Grange? Is this a thing that you've known about? I just found this out
I did
today.
not know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How long is
did you find that out?
How long's the
You got
attendance
some good
list?
reporting on your part there, Will.
Oh, thank you.
Breaking news.
Thank you. Yeah, Alex, I think your attendance record just says truant on it.
Damn. Well,
Just
sorry,
like
man.
school, Alex.
Just got to produce, trying to produce a show here.
You had a meeting, man. You had a meeting,
Takes
the
a-
producers meeting.
Takes a lot of work behind the scenes.
All right, Grange.
Damn, I didn't know that.
The small yeah, me neither, honestly. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. I mean, what does it really change? But yeah. So, Grange, we want to talk to you about, Fred and his contractual details. Obviously, Fred talked about it after the game yesterday, made a point to sort of clarify and clear the air. You put out the report in addition to Josh Lewinberg, who was first on this, that there were discussions around his deal in the offseason. The Raptors potentially may or may not have formally or informally or whatever offered 4 years, $114 million. Clearly, there's a good working relationship between Fred and the front office. But what can you tell us about sort of just like what those talks have been? And obviously, because that deal's still technically on the table to be signed, are there any sort of ongoing discussions around this?
Yeah, I mean, we're into a ton of semantics here, I think, but and Fred, I give him a lot of credit for how he handled that the other day, and I'm sure he wasn't all that. Well, he said he wasn't all that thrilled about that stuff being out there, and I think the way to kind of think about this is, yes, there were obviously conversations, triggered by the CBA. He's 2 years out from a deal, so he's eligible to sign an extension. But at that point, it makes perfect sense why. Certainly from Fred's side, they would have wanted to kind of just table that and say, you know what, let's look into this in the summer. And I'm going back to early in the season, talking with some people close to the situation. Everything was being considered, including the possibility, maybe even the likelihood of Fred declaring himself a free agent and then having the opportunity to re-sign with the Raptors. The Raptors would have his bird rights at a new deal that would be over and above the max extension he could get, which is 4 years, $114 million. And I think if you put all of that into context, Fred coming off an all-star season, the salary cap going up and projected to go up further, you can see perfectly why he wouldn't be in a sprint, maybe not even a rush, to sign, the 4 year, $114 million. And I kind of go back to, I was in Edmonton for the Raptors exhibition game, and I think either just before or maybe just after that game, the Tyler Hero deal got announced. That's like 4 years, $130. And we were kind of joking around, and Fred's kind of figuratively rubbing his hands together, right? Like he's like, well, I'm an all-star. Tyler Hero's not. I play defense. Tyler Hero less so. And like I think there was a lot of excitement there. And I think if you kind of keep working through this, and had Fred had the type of season in the first half that he had last year, certainly the first half, but as an all-star, and had the Raptors kind of been where they thought they would be, let's say 7 games over 500 versus whatever they are now, 6 games under, all that makes perfect sense. But I think what's a little awkward here is, Fred, he's certainly playing much better lately, but we all know he struggled by his standards, statistically. And all of a sudden it's kind of the fact that there may have been put it this way, I think had Fred put his hand up and said, yeah, I'll take that deal, the Raptors would have rushed over to give it to him. You know what I mean? I just where the economics of the league were and where it was headed and all of that, and that may still happen. But I just think that's why it was such a newsy thing, and you know, whether there was a formal offer, is that offer still on the table? You know, I'm certainly not going to contradict Fred on that, but you know, I think it's for sure there was a discussion and there was a decision on each side to say, look, let's revisit this. And I think what's relevant is, to a certain degree, and we'll see how the rest of the season plays out, the dynamics of that discussion have probably changed a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, even to your point, like, you know, if the Raptors were 7 games over 500 rather than under it, right? I think Fred obviously would be a big determinant in that as one of the lead guys on the team. I mean, like,
100%.
if he was playing at last season's level, I don't think anyone would have even sort of batted an eye. They probably would have looked at it like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Because, you know, this is what the situation is. But of course, the season is fluid, and honestly, you know, Fred, even with the last, you know, couple of games here where he's played better, you know, the reality is he is still kind of struggling on the whole on the season. In fact, I thought that, you know, two of the bigger things that sort of happened to the Raptors this year in just terms of just like you needed to see more from these two guys, for me was Fred and Scotty, and both those guys have sort of shown more of late as well. But, you know, if Fred sort of doesn't turn it around, or if he kind of continues to sort of be up and down the way he has been so far, do you think that 114 is still on the table? Is it less than 114? Does that become a problem? Like, please look into your crystal ball, Grange.
Thank you. Well, first of all, like, was it ever exactly on the table? I mean, we don't know. But would the Raptors do that deal now? I'm not sure. You know, I think it really is tied down to team success.
Sure,
and that's why this is just such a, like, I've been doing this for a long time, I hate to admit, but yes, it's been a long time. And I kind of go back, and there's never been a point like this in the last decade anyway. Maybe 13, 14, when it looked like, you know, Masai came in and it looked like he was going to, you know, really dismantle everything, and came very close to doing it, were it not for, you know, James Dolan having second thoughts on Kyle Lowry. You know, but since then, like, I can't really recall a moment where so many things are fluid. And, you know, and so you kind of have to go back to other eras, other regimes, so to speak, to kind of get to a moment where you have this kind of feel. And the bottom line overall is, and this applies not only to Fred, but it'll apply to, you know, anyone else in this kind of window or mixture, is if this team, if this group can't show that they are more competitive in the East than they've been, like, and I would say significantly more, there's going to, you know, a lot of people are going to be having a hard time getting the money in the years that they would have hoped to, and if things were going better. And, you know, I just don't see how that, you know, the ownership and management would double down and reinvest and in fact provide raises to, you know, to a group that, you know, last year was as nice a year as it was. They were one and done in the playoffs, and this year is, who knows if they'd even make it. And so I think that's where all of this that's really, really dicey. And so, you know, could there be a scenario where, yeah, they do end up, you know, making that offer to Fred, and you know, Fred goes around the league and is like, you know what, maybe there isn't that much money out there for me. This is the best deal I got, but maybe it's a different type of deal, different years, but it's given in a way that maybe is designed that he makes it a little easier to trade him. You know, I think ultimately, as we all know, that you can't afford to have a player as good as Fred and as important as Fred not be with the organization and not get some kind of return on that. Like, to have him leave as a free agent, I think would be a big mistake. Yeah. And that's where a lot of this excitement, or not, I shouldn't say excitement, I think a lot of this, I don't know, drama is the right word, like tension. I think that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, no doubt. And you know what, even thinking about that approach, I mean, the Raptors even took that approach with Kyle a couple of times as well. I remember.
No, and they took it with Fred too, by the way. Right, you know, if you recall, like, I mean, there was some thought maybe Phoenix was going to sweep in, maybe Detroit was going to sweep in, maybe you know,
I think were involved. Yeah.
And retrospectively, the Knicks probably wish they had. But that offer didn't really come, and that's an interesting thing to keep in mind here too. And I'm glad you brought that up. Is Sy Jerry and Bobby Webster have done an excellent job at kind of calculating the market and kind of looking out and seeing what is available out there, what is most likely that somebody else might offer, where they have to be, how confident they can be in letting a guy get to free agency, knowing that, they can kind of take care of him on the back end. And in the end, they, maybe they don't lose the player. That was Kyle's case both times going to free agency. That was certainly Fred's experience the first time he went to free agency. And we'll see what happens this summer.
Yeah, Grange. It's a month before the trade deadline. I was reading a story from Tim Bontemps at ESPN earlier today, and I was here in Toronto for a bit, and he said that the team has insisted that they're going to take until the end of the month at least to decide where they're headed. I know they started this homestay, and a lot of people talking about this was such a crucial stretch for them with two really disappointing losses. Even with the win yesterday, they're obviously out of the playoff picture right now, out of the play-in. Where do you see them right now? Because it seems like the whole league is just, at least everybody's saying, the whole league is just waiting for the Raptors to kind of decide which players to make available.
Yeah, I mean, that was a similar finding I had when I wrote about that last week. And, I think they're definitely going to wait. You can't, unless nobody's going to give you their best offer now, a month out. It might get a little more, spicy as you get closer to February, and certainly that last week of February, first week of February. I think that's where the intensity really, really picks up. So I think that's what's going on. But I mean, I think the word is out there, right? One way or the other, the word is out there. There are some players available for all the reasons we've been discussing. And the highest profile players, the ones that kind of might, really move the needle for really, really good teams, are, depending on your adjective, right? They're it's going to take a lot to move them, and that's OG and Pascal. But I think the bigger question is where. I stick to this is. If the Raptors end up finishing 10th, 9th, 11th, 12th, even 7th or 8th, frankly, but just kind of trying to squeeze out every last win and not really making a ton of progress up the standings, and they don't carefully manage the talent base they have, and they end up drafting middle of the pack in a draft where, you go up to top 6, 7, certainly top 3 or 4, there's just some extraordinary talent. That really sets you back as an organization. And I think everyone I speak to, there's a real sense of uncertainty around what the right path is moving forward. And, that's not to say it's uncertain because they just haven't arrived at a decision yet. And you can see why, because you start working through how the one decision affects the next decision, affects the next decision. And it's like I said off the top, it's a really tricky situation that I think the organization is in.
Right. I think one thing, if there's something that's sort of uniformly been reported, is that Gary Trent Jr. seems to be available on the trade market. And I think maybe this is the sentiment I've seen a lot from fans, is sort of just like, if Gary's shot the ball so well, and clearly he has, he's still early in his career, he's only 23 or 24, why is it, that a certainty versus like Fred's having a tough year, but it seems like the Raptors are probably going to move on and continue to stay with Fred. And in fact, they might even extend Fred to a big deal. Why is it such that Gary seems to not have that same maybe continuity on his side?
Well, the one thing I can tell you is I don't think it is a certainty they trade him.
Okay.
I think it's a certainty they listen, right? And but I think, and again, like I think they like the player. and I think he's really earned some fans at all levels of the organization with the way he's handled himself since he had that slump. And, be it coming off the bench. And, I remember his first game coming off the bench. I wanted to talk to him after the game, and he was up in the gym at the top of the Scotiabank Arena with Rico Hines and his dad, Gary, putting in extra workout. Came down, and he was in the ladder. Like, it wasn't just, let's get a few shots up. Like, he went and did it. And, and I think when you look at the results and how he's performed on the bench, off the bench, coming off the bench or starting, he's really earned a lot of respect, not that he didn't have it before, for how he's handled himself as a pro.
Right.
And when you look at his profile, his age, those guys are hard to find. And so I think, what's going to go into that is what degree of certainty do they have that they can sign him in the summer as a free agent? Because he's going to opt out, obviously.
Yeah.
And the worst thing, it would just be a critical error worth all the criticism I think that would come management's way, is if he goes to free agency, leaves, and they're left with nothing. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why, he's in, square in the bullseye of the trade market, is because, but that said, I go back to conversations I had early in the year on this topic, and I was told, no, there's no certainty we're going to trade this guy. Everyone thinks we're going to trade this guy, but there's no certainty on that. But it would go to a careful calculation of what's out there, knowing that they would have bird rights on him. And, so if it really came to that, they could pay more than anyone else. But clearly they would have a price tag above which they wouldn't want to go over.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, if they play themselves out of it and they really turn the season around and you decide to pay everyone at the end of the season, you're more likely looking at a situation where you're going to be either in the luxury tax immediately or in the very near future when Pascal and OG's contracts also come up. So it does feel like, you have to make some of these decisions now, and especially if you want to be able to maintain your talent pool and continue to sort of have incoming pieces without guys sort of just walking for nothing. You have to make some of these decisions now. And you've reported that OG's trade return would be very significant as well, and that's not a surprise. I see OG as somebody who that would hold up the trade market, because if I'm a contender, I'm looking at OG Anunoby and saying, if I can add him to my roster, I'm going to hold on to my chips and wait until he's on the table, right? And so you got to really see how that sort of situation goes out as well. But finally, Grain, just real quick, just a couple of other ones we've seen out there. Are the Raptors still in on Jakob Poeltl? We've seen the Raptors tied now to Kelly Oubre. What's going on? What's your thoughts on that stuff?
I mean, I think it more comes down to, do they want to kind of slide back and make sure that they're in the mix for, the top end of the draft, or do they want to kind of push in and again, I mean, you go, the price I've heard consistently for Jakob is 2 firsts. I don't know if they're unprotected. What kind of protections would be on that first, but it's not nothing. And Kelly Oubre, I mean, I'm not sure of his contract status right now, but he doesn't strike me as a Raptors player, to be honest.
No, not at all.
So that one might be a little bit surprising. Maybe it's just one of those ones where you kind of, I don't know. That one, I wouldn't put too much into that. But I think it really comes to, is it worth, again, going back to this core, is it worth doubling down and, dealing future assets to get a really good player, obviously, in Jakob Poeltl. Mm-hmm. But again, it leaves you in a situation where if you're going to go that direction, how much do you have to invest in the core around Jakob Poeltl now? And is that something that gets you wins? And I think philosophically, there's a view here that, like, if you're just trying to build a 50-win team, that's not, I mean, it's not nothing, but it's not, if that's your end goal, you're not winning a title. And so I think if you're trying to win a title, and I think what's the path to winning a title, and I think that's really something that's part of the decision making here. And if you have to take a couple of steps back to upgrade your overall elite talent, to do that, maybe this is the time to do it. And but all these, the other thing too, as you guys know, all these decisions can get pushed, right? Like they're all good players. If you do end up signing them, if you do end up in the summer, it's not like all of a sudden we won't be having a discussion a year ago. And in fact, that might end up be the most likely scenario, especially as it relates to OG, who would have 1 year left on his deal and everything. But I think it really comes to, what are you going to do between now and April? And if you're, like in that old plan for what scenario, right? And how can you engineer the best outcome, whatever it might be.
All right, Grange. Appreciate you for coming on the show and sharing us your insight. And then, I'll see you at the arena on Tuesday when the Raptors play host to the Charlotte Hornets. But for now, that does it for us today. I've been your host, Will Lou, and you've been listening to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find The Raptor Show wherever you listen to podcasts, and please subscribe and please rate and review the show. Thanks again to producer and co-host Alice Wong. Thanks to Michael Range. Thanks to our board producer Derek Vandale and Jennifer Rolnick for helping with the YouTube stream, and we'll be back tomorrow.